Hi guys, welcome to Limpopo, a cool cloudy day here from the Cannabiz Africa headquarters. And shall I tell you what's in the news headlines this morning? Felbridge Medical Cannabis has just exported South Africa's first legal cannabis crop. It sent over 300 kilograms to Pure Gene in Switzerland last week via Cape Town International Airport. It's a historic moment for South Africa, said CEO Leslie Zettler, and that's a turnaround story. What used to be polka dot strawberries outside Stellenbosch is now South Africa's leading weed exporter. Investment advisor Pierre van der Hoeven says government should put the legalization of adult use cannabis at the front of the queue if it is to unlock the economic potential of the so-called Dagga dollar. He told the Gibbs Business School graduates webinar that South Africa provides the ideal environment to create a world-class cannabis economy. But he said government is missing the biggest trick in its book by excluding adult use or recreational cannabis from its national cannabis master plan. He said Africa is renowned for its high THC strains such as Durban Poison and Malawi Gold, and that developing these brands and other genetics should be the cornerstone of the national cannabis strategy. There's also been boardroom drama aplenty at the two JSE companies that are focused on cannabis. Nutritional Holdings failed on Friday to get its shares relisted as it turns over top staff like a Rizla factory. And Labat Holdings issued a statement late on Friday cautioning shareholders that it's going from a modest profit last August into a horrible loss. That's despite the string of deals it's done in the last 6 months. Investor and analyst Siboto tells us that these companies may have peaked too soon as the regulatory framework for legalizing cannabis is yet to be put in place. The United Nations is warning that super strength cannabis products are on the rise, and this makes young adult consumers more vulnerable than they think. The UN 2021 drug report says a trend over the last 10 years has been an increase in potency of new cannabis strains and products. It says in some cases, weed is 4 times stronger than what was available around 2010. And it says that it's alarmed because over the same period of time, the perception that cannabis is not harmful has risen, especially amongst teenagers. The UN wants all cannabis advertising banned, a recommendation that is not going to fly, especially with the likes of New York legalizing this year. And finally, US Olympic hopeful Sha'Carri Richardson is out of the Olympics after testing positive for cannabis in her pre-Olympic trials. She says she was in a state of emotional distress and has apologized to fans for letting them down, but she still has a crack at the 400-meter gold. That's if she still passes her dope test later this week. And that's it from the Cannabiz Africa News Desk for this time.
Interesting stuff, Brett. Thanks for that update. I think one of the key takeaways on that is that firstly, the United Nations is trying to say that they must ban cannabis advertising. I mean, that's just totally ridiculous. That's so regressive, and you can't bring an industry online and try and squash it. So, I understand in terms of having limitations like you do with alcohol, not advertising mainstream TV, etc. But to just say, come out right and say they want to ban it. However, I do think they have a point. I remember when I lived in London many years ago, this is 10, 15 years ago, they actually decriminalized cannabis, and then a few years later recriminalized it because of the skunk that a lot of the youngsters were smoking. And it was very high grade, high THC skunk, which was definitely having a negative impact on people. So I know for all the growers out there, it's about growing dank buzz and as high THC as possible. But we also need to understand this is a psychoactive ingredient, and there needs to be some responsibility. So
we need to be careful, yeah.
Yeah, we need to be careful, absolutely.
The problem, I think, is trying to control something as nuanced and as complicated as the plant, as we know it. And on the one hand, you can say yes, we shouldn't be banning cannabis advertising. On the other hand, I mean, why is this top US athlete being banned for failing a dope test? It's not a performance-enhancing drug, cannabis. Well, I mean, we in terms of straight sports definitions. And so it's difficult to see on what grounds, really, in an objective world, she should be disqualified from running the Olympics. If it was steroids, it would be a completely different story. But that's also a different conversation.
Yeah, totally. I think it's highlighted the fact that this is becoming a bigger topic of conversation all the time. I mean, I know that Joe Biden, said that the rules, but then he also caveated that, we also need to look at the rules and whether they're relevant anymore. And I read her story, and she's been through some personal tragedy at the moment, and obviously used cannabis as a coping mechanism. Plus, it hadn't been in her bloodstream for a short enough period to have an actual impact on the run. So I think a very unfair decision, in my opinion. But again, there are rules, and these are the kind of incidents that help us break those down and analyze them, assess if they're actually valid. So very important. I think just lastly, the only other point was, obviously as the industry grows and builds out, we've got Labat and the other guys who have been taking a bit of a beating, in the media for what's been going on. And on the one side, I empathize, because I think that the industry is not coming online as quickly as it should. There are not enough, the legislation is not moving fast enough. So a lot of people have been, as Siboto said, come into the market too early, have overcapitalized. So I think they're the victims to that to some degree. But on the other flip side, it's like, guys, come on, get it together. You've got to put your reporting in. You're listed, the rules. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you're actually giving the industry a bad name by doing that. Investors are all lining up wanting to invest, but stories like this don't really help. So tidy it up, guys. Tidy it up. All of us need to tidy it up.
I think as a takeaway, we need to all be quite efficient and focused in terms of what we're doing, and understand the guidelines and the space that we're playing in. We're not doing this backhandedly and underground anymore. We're actually out there in the forefront. So we need to represent in a line.
Yeah, behave professionally.
Yeah, but one last quick takeout from me is, isn't this one of the dilemmas of corporate culture trying to take on something like cannabis? I mean, to try and, especially in a time of COVID like this, where supply chains are being so disrupted. But the plant is a mystery, and has been one for years and years and years, as long as humankind's been around. And as corporate America and mainstream capitalism try and get their hands on this plant and regulate it, so all these contradictions are going to jump up and blow up in their faces. And the thing that we've got to be grateful for, it's now becoming part of the global dialogue.
Absolutely. I always find it quite amusing when you watch these international webinars in the States, and you've got these these poppies in their suits, and I first smoked cannabis. It was like a week ago, and they're like all these experts. But that's the reality. Is at the end of the day, we want as many people to smoke cannabis as possible, because we feel it can change the world. Anyway, let's get on to lifestyle. Brett, we're back with you in a minute. Thanks so much for joining us. Canna Lifestyle coming to you all the way from Johannesburg. Noxy, the Kush Queen.
Thank you, Trenton, for that awesome introduction. Well, in Canna Lifestyle News today, we're talking COVID-19 and cannabis. As COVID-19 infections continue to rise in South Africa, a lot of cannabis consumers, both recreational and medicinal, are beginning to ask themselves what all this means for them. Is it safe, especially where the COVID-19 vaccine is concerned? Is there an actual reason to worry? Well, Leafly recently posted an article titled, "Does COVID-19 Interact with the Vaccine Shot?" And according to Dr. Frank Lucido, who is a medical cannabis specialist from Berkeley, California, there's no reported cause for concern. He goes on to encourage people to stick to their routines. But you can read more about that on www.leafly.com. And go ahead and comment on Craft Cannabis TV YouTube page and let us know your thoughts. Back to you, Trenton and Linda.
Awesome. Yo. COVID and cannabis. Lots of conversation going on about it at the moment. I just wish that we would pull together as a globe and just start to really research. There's definitely research that is coming out at the moment, which is really in support of cannabis being something that can assist with COVID.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I find the whole thing weird, especially in America, you can get a jab and a joint, or a jab. Can you imagine if they gave everyone a free beer to have a jab? Everyone would be lining up.
I'll be first in line.
Stop alcohol, but you can have a beer if you have a jab. That's the way to get it out. We'd have the whole place vaccinated, quick sticks.
100%,
yep.
Man.
100%.
Cool.
I'm hoping that maybe the beer is cannabis infused. I mean, that would be nice.
Yeah, so beer, jab, and cannabis. I like it.
Well, watch this space, because as we all know, earlier this year, Distell quietly moved into the CBD industry. You know that it already has picked up the brand Durban Poison from the Durban Brewers. That's the Durban Poison beer brand. And I think that if you see where beverages and edibles are going in the United States in terms of being the fastest rising cannabis consumption sector, I think we were talking about corporate capitalism and cannabis earlier. The smart guys are already in there looking to do product development and seeing that there's a whole tendency away from cigarettes and alcohol, and cannabis is a new wellness product. It's going to find its way into health and wellness products on our shelves.
Absolutely. I think one of the things people also just need to be mindful of, I mean, there's this cannabis like health drink in South Africa, and it's all over the place, and people buy it because they think there's cannabis in it, but there's nothing. There's like a little bit of hemp seed oil, or it does no benefit to you. It doesn't really help with the taurine and all that other crap that they have in there. So I think it's important that when people are buying cannabis products, even if they're buying edibles, we all know the edibles illegal market is massive in South Africa. But two things. Firstly, watch your dosing. Secondly, if you are selling edibles, which is illegal, make sure you've got dosing on your packages. When we travel, we've been given like 50 milligram brownies before. Yeah. Now that would make me fall over. Maybe not you.
Yeah, no, I'm a little stronger, but still, I mean, to the average user,
50.
Flex the 50, flex the 100.
Please don't start with 50.
No, 50 in a bad day. If you're having a bad day, 50 will pick you up.
But it is about.
But if you're a new edibles consumer, it's probably better to start with less. So anything that is around 10, 15, maybe 20, but I wouldn't do that on your first try.
Maybe 5,
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think the number one thing that I keep on getting asked about is like when people talk about their first times actually consuming cannabis, but in an edible format, they always have some really horrific story. And I think the way that I liken it is like we would never take a bottle of vodka and drink it one time. You'd obviously take your time with it. Same with edibles, because it's a cookie and it's delicious. You're gonna eat it and then you're gonna like, oh my god.
I do know some people who would take a bottle and drink it all, but then they deserve to feel bad.
What? I read an interesting piece in Forbes magazine, I think it was the other day, about a bit of a quirky piece about edibles being the new answer to airline travel stress in this day and age. And if you get your dosing right, you're doing the transatlantic flight and you hit it just right, so much so that I've seen these recipes for how to dose 4 transatlantic flights with edibles. That's obviously coming from a place where you're allowed to do that and going to a place where you're not going to be punished for having done it.
Yeah, the last time I got high in the sky, I had a little number outside the airport. Yeah. And I walked in, I was in Germany somewhere. And as I walked in, I went through security, and there was this modern new security thing, which like did this whole Zoom thing around you. And I had to stand there. And by this time it had hit me, and this thing just spun around me. And I was rather nervous, but I like that idea. Fly in the sky edibles. There we go. Patent that now.
We'll take that. Also, I'm thinking about Barack Obama. Mr. T. Mr. T was always scared of getting onto a flight whenever the A team had to go from one mission to another, and they usually used to knock him out. So I think maybe an edible would have worked for him quite nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are loads of products.
Think of the new SAA.
The new SAA.
Hitting the high sky.
In the cabin.
Yeah, maybe those guys need to smoke a bit of weed, Great, guys. Thank you so much. That is the news for this week. We'll be back same time, same place. There will be reruns on Craft Cannabis TV. Noxy, thank you so much all the way from Joburg. Brett, thank you so much all the way from Limpopo. Follow Cannabiz Africa, Craft Cannabis TV, Cheeba Cannabis Academy. Until next week. Boom. Peace. Ciao.